Welcome to another episode of Angels, Positivity, and Love. I'm your host, Michael Andre Ford in Texas. I'm the guy who helps people feel, hear, see angels, light beings, your relatives, many loving guides from all over. I've got also amazing guests on this show from all over the world with incredible insights and truly stellar backgrounds. They're also very brave to come on the show. It's not a requirement for anybody to do anything, but often off camera, before or after the show, and sometimes at the end of the show, we take steps, at least blow some sage through two screens. So stick around because you can smell some sage, and whatever you'll allow for in life, if you haven't noticed, is what you bring in, whether we're talking angels, the universe, love, compassion, and so on, or just everyday ordinary life. So today's guest, truly extraordinary, at least 13 or 14 books, one nonfiction bestseller. The rest are fiction and multiple different series. She was a model at age 14. She's a UNICEF Global Ambassador for Australia for child survival, and that's been since 2007. And in short, she's done a lot, been there on so many fronts. Today, she's got a holistic practice, whether it's Reiki, helping others kind of not just heal the trauma or move past the trauma, but to let go of a lot of what they're carrying around. That's a big strength of hers. She is Canadian born, but lived in Australia, has dual citizenship with ethnic roots, sort of Netherlands, Holland, Europe. And she's in Canada, back in Canada, in the Vancouver area. I'd like to welcome TARA RAE MOSS. Now, you'll know her as an author as TARA MOSS, but you'll know her as a healer as Rae MOSS, and that's R-A-E. Rae, thank you so much for coming on Angels, Positivity, and Love. You're fantastic. You are totally flowing. Welcome.
Thank you, Michael. What a beautiful introduction. And it's been wonderful to start this connection. I feel like we might have known each other before.
That happens with some of these guests. We find out much later, and there's not much you can do about it, though, except appreciate the other person. So,
Right. That's right. I've got a candle going for us and we'll look to our chat.
okay, now I did not mention in the intro that you had a major, major medical situation that, in a way, was almost like a can opener for exposing you to much broader existence. Can you share with us that time?
Yes, thank you for asking. So, about 8 years ago, I suffered from a hip injury that led to something called complex regional pain syndrome, which is a rare disease, very debilitating. And on the McGill pain scale, it's considered to be the most painful disorder. So, distressingly, when you look up CRPS or complex regional pain syndrome, you'll see it dubbed the suicide disease. It's very hard to live with. And essentially what happened was that it started in the hip, it spread down the leg, and then it had ipsilateral spread, which means that my body was split in half. That one side of me on the right was sort of a blue color and felt like burning ice. Very cold, actually felt quite dead, but on fire with ice at the same time, if that contradiction can make sense to you. And the other side was normal, if you will. And this was obviously a life-changing thing for me and was a very long healing journey. I'm now very fortunate to say that I'm in remission. I'm in full remission. And the methods of healing that got me to remission were part of what opened my eyes to the broader world, the things that are going on, particularly in the unseen, and really accepting and seeing the different aspects of what make us humans and what make us spirit in this world. You know, we're not humans having spiritual experiences, we're spirits having a human experience, and we need to acknowledge these different aspects of ourselves. So that really kind of, I don't know, I'll say it almost like pushed me through the membrane. It was really being pushed beyond the veil through the illness. I had many near-death experiences and had a lot of experiences out of the body, and that changed things for me quite radically.
And you were in a wheelchair, confined to a wheelchair, but making the most of it, if I read enough press accounts and so on.
Yeah, I was using a wheelchair for many years. I was a very active advocate in pain advocacy spaces and disability spaces. And now that I'm healed, I still speak to those areas on accessibility, but I also speak more broadly as a holistic practitioner who believes in, from a professional and personal perspective, believes in the biopsychosocial-spiritual model of care. So that biomedical is important, the psychological is important, and those things are quite well established now. The psychological, of course, we only started thinking about what in the 70s or something like that. The social really impacts us all greatly as well, and that's more understood now, maybe the last couple of decades. But the spiritual is something that we've really dropped as a culture, unfortunately. But it used to be very much part of our culture and societies going way, way, way back, making today a very unique period in history in that we've actually stripped our lives of this connection with energy, connection with spirit, whatever you want to call it. For me, it's non-religious, but it can be different things for different people. It's that connection and that interconnectedness that unfortunately we have broken over time. And it's my belief, and certainly what I find in my practice, that we need to reintegrate, rediscover the sacred and rediscover our connection. And that really affects all those areas of our life, physical, mental, social, and spiritual altogether.
Mm. Okay. What else? Tell us a little bit about your practice today and how you're helping people. Do you see it expanding in the future, or you're pretty expanded out as it is now? Life has a way of keeping things moving and expanding. Where are you in that whole uh, path as a healer, and what you're doing today?
Thank you. So, since I became well, in fact, before I was really fully in remission, I was already doing a lot of work with clients where I was able to. And my calling has been very much, me getting tapped on the shoulder to work as a shamanic practitioner primarily. So, that's coming from the Norse and Nordic traditions of my ancestors. And of course, the word shamanism is kind of a funny mixed word that came from anthropology. But if we're to take that word on a face value, we're looking at essentially the oldest form of healing known, and it is universal. It was practiced around the world, at least within this framework of what we understand the word to mean. And for me, that has a Nordic Norse flavor. I also work as a Reiki practitioner. And particularly with the shamanic work and also the Reiki, it seems that I've been tapped on the shoulder to work with people in a variety of contexts, but specifically extraction work, removing things that no longer serve, including like entities, attachments, negative energies. And I think that this was part of the training, if you will, that I had in my healing journey, my initiation, if you will, did attune me to those types of energies. So whilst I might have at first imagined people would want to come to me for some relaxing Reiki, what I actually find in reality is that when people come to me, they have often some pretty big things that they are struggling with, and they just need a little bit of assistance or a guide, if you will, to help them to let go of those things. And that's part of my job. I also do grief work and funerals, so I am very often the one at the front of the chapel or at the graveside, because again, that's an area that's comfortable to me. Having had experiences that I have, I understand that that death is not obliteration. It's not the end. It's a transition, and so it's part of my calling to work with people during that transition as well.
Beautiful. There's a book somewhere up on my shelf that's one of those historical books on just different cultures around the globe, indigenous shaman stories, how they became shaman, how they carry on with their practices. Again, it's a little historical, might be the 80s, 90s, but many of those stories, how they became shaman, are very painful. Either disease, they were out of body, they were dead for a certain amount of time, just barely breathing. Even Native American, I can think of a couple. I think it was Black Elk, who people can meet today. Black Elk had that situation, and yeah, the parents want healing so he can go back to being a normal kid. The shaman comes in and realizes, no, he's been picked for the role, and
Yeah.
he's got to honor it, and so on. So it sounds like that's kind of what you went through. Can you talk to us about the biggest picture that you've sort of taken stock of when it comes to the universe? Is love the fabric of the universe? Is positivity, abundance? Can you give us some sort of a billboard version first before we dive in?
I'm not sure I'm not sure I understand the question fully. A
Well,
billboard version of how the universe works might be a little
yeah,
more,
the
might
big
be
big
more
scope.
than
It's
question.
only an eternal question for man. I'm sorry to throw a big
That's
one at
right.
you. Yeah.
It's a big question to grapple with. What I will say is that death is not the end, that it is a transition, and through our lives, everything we go through, including challenges and trials, are all transitions, initiations, and invitations to become our next self, our evolving self, whatever that is for us individually. And so, even in the darker times, or even in times of pain, I think it's important to try to gently hold that in mind, that there may indeed be a purpose behind this, as hard as that is right now. And I would not have wanted to hear that a few years ago. And I also recommend that you not say that to someone going through it. Hey, there's a reason for this, because it's really not comforting. But actually, finding the gift in the difficulty is one of those things that helps build resilience. And so I feel very fortunate now that I've built the resilience and I don't have to be in pain at the moment. And I can use the things that I have learned, and the skills and the training that I have with those experiences in my own personal life to hopefully help others, and to be able to be part of other people's healing experiences as they heal themselves.
Okay, now you don't have to answer this next one, but in the 2000s, let's say you were just that international bestseller writing, and someone had come up to you and said, "Hey, psst, this is going to happen to you in the future around 2016 or so." How would the old you or the previous you, it's still you. And by the way, my reaction on all this stuff is like, whoa, what are you talking about? For everything spiritual, angels, Native American chiefs, all the rest. It took a long time on the uptake. For you, what would your reaction have been in like 2008, about 8 years in the future, if you had known what was coming?
It's an interesting question, because I had experiences as a child and experiences through my life which were, not explainable, if you will. But if I think about how that compares to now, it was infrequent. I would just once a year or whatever, there'd be something that was like that. That's impossible. How could I have known that? So a lot of sight, if you will, and vision. And of course, we take those things and we put them on a shelf. We put them on ice, because there's no framework for understanding them, or even accepting them, or talking about them in many cases. So I would have been rather shocked and surprised, but there would have been a part of me that went,
Mm.
yeah, there's a something going on. There's a something. I want to show you something, Michael. Actually, I work with the runes a lot. So again, that Nordic background. So I work with the Elder Futhark, as well as the Northumbrian and Anglo-Saxon runes. And I do something called birth rune reading, sacred birth runes. And I recently got a tattoo of mine, which you can see here. And what's interesting about these is I often think, when I'm doing a reading for someone, how would I have taken this if I was 20? If someone was telling me the things I tell people in these readings, it would be very hard to get your head around. But I'm 50 now, and I know every one of these energies. I'm like, oh, they have been having their way with me my whole life, and I have been exuding and expressing those energies. I've been living in those energies, coming through me and coming towards me my whole life. And I recognize it because I'm 50. If I was 20, I would be, why do I have the rune of the grave?
Mm.
Why do I have the rune of the cremation fire? I'm like, it makes total sense for the experiences that I've had. It's literally like my CRPS was written in the runes, my death work was written in the runes, as well as my healing work. And as a 20-year-old, I wouldn't have fully understood it, but I hope there'd be some part of me that would go, that sounds interesting and not totally off. There's something, there's a something. And I think that's what we all need to do, is just stay open to the something and see when it reveals itself.
Is it fair to say that everyone can pay attention a little bit more daily?
Absolutely. And when we do, when we stay open to the something and we pay attention, the patterns begin to emerge. And when we have those patterns, we've got, knowing for ourselves and seeing for ourselves. And as we talk about this, and you mentioned this, Michael, People will tell us stories, or we'll read a book and we'll go, I don't know, I haven't had those experiences. I don't know what this means. Maybe, I'm not sure. But when we see for ourselves and know for ourselves, everything changes. And so it's just that openness to the something. And
Hmm.
it's going to be different for different people, but the world is so much richer when we just have that openness.
Nice. Okay, when you were a kid in your teens or later in life, you mentioned some of those experiences, whether it was seeing, just knowing something that couldn't be explained, got put on the shelf. Could you share one or two of those that might have been a positive experience that you were just like, "Whoa, what happened?" What were some of those?
Well, I, without having any of the kind of language around it, I was already that person that you would ask to come with you to look at a house before you bought it, because I would tell you about the energies happening in the house. Again, there was no language around it. It was just something like family and friends would do. Like, I really want you to come. And I'd come into a room and go, oh, there's something's really happened here. So, for example, there was one place which was an absolute steal, beautiful house, incredible view. And this was in Australia. And one of the people was really into it, and their family was really into it. Like, you've got to get this place. It's a great investment. The other person was like, oh, there's something. I don't know. I don't know. So I come in, and it's like just every, the hairs on the back of my neck are standing up. And I feel like there's this energy just clinging and hanging on to me. I'm like, there's something that's very, very not good here. And I'm looking around, and it's not visible to the eye. And the real estate agent standing there, and I'm like, did something happen here? And at first they don't say anything. I turned to the window and pulled back the curtain, and carved into the wood of the frame for the window was the swear word that begins with a C. Okay,
Oh,
I'll leave it there. The four-letter word that begins with a C. And I'm like, that was carved in with a knife. What is the story? And the story was that a mother and her daughter, who were both experiencing mental illness and paranoia, trapped themselves into the house, nailed the windows and doors shut, and had this domestic violent situation. The state had to intervene, take them into care, and the state was selling the house. That's why it was such a good deal. And it was in the walls, it was in the air, the energy was very strong. So they'd pulled all the furniture up, but that energy was there. And when we heard that story, it was like, yeah, you can feel it everywhere. So if you're just looking at a picture, or you're looking on paper, you say, this is wonderful. You come inside and you go, can this even be cleared? Hopefully, yes, but it's going to take a lot of work. Someone with a lot of skill would have to clear and like create a rebirth for that property, because there's a lot of trauma and a lot of psychic imprint, if you will, that's in that space. So that's just an example of the kinds of I don't know, senses that were very, just everybody knew that I had, but we didn't have a language for it, and I certainly wasn't any sort of a professional. It was just there.
you mentioned a word, rebirth, and I think that was also one of the runes in a way, if you don't mind saying grave, or the other one, the ashes, those two. And then just means opportunity for the next chapter.
That's
Can
right.
you talk to us about rebirth, the full circle? I think Native Americans use the circle as well if we go to mythology, and there's a Norse aspect of it as well. Can you take us that direction in terms of rebirth and how everything has a beginning and end and so on?
That's right. So even if we're to look at the Elder Futhark, which is the 24 runes, you can see there's a story going on. Those who are interested in tarot, and tarot is not my expertise, there's a journey that we're seeing. So when we're asking for our signposts, if you will, from the runes or these cards, we're finding out like what's happening with the journey right now. What are the messages? But we know that in fact the journey kind of continues. There's no point at which you reach the ultimate pinnacle moment, and then it's static. There's no stasis there, there's movement. And we see this in nature, we see the cycles of the seasons. So I think it's incredibly important to accept that there's always going to be, well, wouldn't it be boring if there wasn't, change? There's a wonderful rune that's rather feared actually in the Elder Futhark called Hagalaz. And Hagalaz is the first of Hela's Ayat. Now, Hela is the Norse goddess of the underworld. She accepts all of our grief. She accepts illness and disease and all those who pass away from the same. So if you pass from old age or illness or childbirth, or you're a little one who didn't make it, Hela takes you into her care. This is one of my favorite depictions of Hela. So she's formidable to some because she's a walking memento mori, half half dead and half living, but it's with compassion. At least I see her very much as a compassionate goddess. And you'll notice that I have Hela's rune, which is the grave, and that I myself was half one, half the other for the period of my illness. So in a way, she's sort of physically manifested in me. But if we think about Hagalaz in this first rune of her Ayat, we can see that you've got the hail. Hagalaz means hail. But the Norse thought of it as a cosmic seed or like the coldest grain. So it's a seed of sorts. It comes and it smashes down the old barn that was maybe rotting at the beams, right? And you think, oh no, destruction, catastrophe. But actually, the hail turns to water and it washes away what no longer serves, what was needing to be put to rest. And then that water nurtures the ground underneath and something new can grow. That is the healing of Hagalaz. And as you mentioned, those cycles that we have in our life. So I had a massive Hagalaz moment with my illness where everything from before just about was taken down by the hail. And now I'm in that wonderful period of rebirth where, things have washed away that suited my life very well before and that I'm very grateful for, deeply grateful for, but that are no longer sustainable, that are no longer right for me, that no longer serve the higher purpose. And so I'm in that wonderful period now of like, the field is clear of that destruction, and there's that nurturing in the soil, and there's that regrowth, and that is the rebirth process. And you cannot have that without the Hagalaz. Otherwise, you just have a rotting barn, right?
I love this. For your writing, you're a writer, it's in your blood, and it may mean that you've taken a little time out just for different reasons to develop the healing side of your practice. But if you've been playing around, and you don't have to reveal much here, if you've got 6 books in your Vanderwall series, I didn't say the first name, Pandora series, you've got 4 books, and the Billy Walker series, you've got 2 books. You've got 2 nonfiction. One was a bestseller that was your memoir, The Fictional Woman. Have you been toying around with either, like, I'm gonna sound cliche, but a Viking Nordic series or a healing thing or a non-fictional healing book? Is it always in the back of your mind? You're just waiting for that right combination?
That's a good question. So my historical series with Billy Walker is set in the 1940s, and I just finished a 3rd book in that series, which comes out next year, so it hasn't been published yet. And that series also, there's an option to adapt it for television. So I'm hopeful that I'll be able to share Billy Walker, who's this fast talking, fast driving, champagne swilling Nazi hunter investigator from the 1940s. Imagine Philip Marlowe as Ava Gardner. So she is someone I want to share with viewers as well as readers, and she just came out in the UK in book form. And so that's always going to be part of my world. And there's a way in which it's not about healing in the metaphysical, but there's a fullness to the characters and their journeys that I hope touch on all of these different aspects. And a nonfiction book I think would be very suitable now. I've been thinking about the right approach and honestly have not begun. Because that biopsychosocial spiritual model that I work with in my practice, that I have experienced professionally and personally with so many people, I think it's something the UN acknowledges. It's something that's very common in end of life care. So in the funeral work that I do and death doula work, biopsychosocial spiritual model is the model, but we only really accept that in like the last weeks of life, right? The rest of our lives, it's somehow not relevant. So I think there's something to be said around that. And there's something to be said about, the witch wound, I'll call it, because anytime a woman is a spiritual healer, there's that association, that history, even the runes being used sort of to point to something evil when they are, you know, divine, they are beautiful, they are these incredible cosmic energies. So there's a lot to say, and it's a matter of finding and maybe getting a tap on the shoulder actually as to, you know, what does that look like? How can I be useful and of service to these conversations in my next book of nonfiction?
Mm. And when you talked about the Billy Walker series, I was drawn to thinking about Dick Francis and all
Oh
those
yeah.
books because you had a flawed character, just a character who was going through difficult times. And usually by the end of every book, you felt better because they had achieved some sort of more inner peace, uh,
Mhm.
denouement, whatever you want to call it.
They're,
So
they're also like there's stories about resilience, and because I've been doing human rights advocacy work for so many years, for a couple of decades, there's that aspect as well of just our like humanity, um, and what people go through, and especially World War II. You know, I can't write about World War II without writing about human rights, without writing about inequality and social justice or injustice. And I think that like brings in the whole human, like how we are in the world, what we've done, and also how we can overcome. So there's stories of resilience actually, and I hope that when people read the series, The War Widow and The Ghosts of Paris, and I've got a working title for the next one, but I won't say that in case it changes. But when you read these books, I hope you get a sense of like Billy Walker's in the driver's seat. I'm really happy to be in the passenger seat and just have her go and just she can just take me through it, and you know that you're in good hands. And that's the beauty of Billy Walker, I think.
mm. Okay, going with the 1930s, even 20s, maybe even 1910s, there was a lot of ideology back then and a lot of division, and it was all over especially Europe and elsewhere. And I don't think thinking has ever left us as humans for at least a few thousand years. So there's a lot of thinking that goes on up here. We could call it rejecting, reacting, knowing to the preclusion of possibility. What am I missing? Judging if I didn't say that. All the stuff that's fear-based, a lot of it. A lot of our thinking is technically kind of a waste of energy, but guess what? We can't help ourselves. We're going to be doing thinking the rest of our lives. How do you reconcile that with all the love, the allowing, the creativity, the inspiration, the fun, the joy, the smiling, the laughter, the dancing that happens here? Can you use your language to discuss the two different flows and why we should pay attention more here?
That's wonderful. So I mean, our brains are wonderful, and how marvelous and magnificent has been our use of our left brain, let's say, in our culture, the, you know, technology and medicine and science, wonderful, right? We also can lose touch with our, you know, if you want to use the right brain, left brain analogy, you can lose touch with that right brain side, and particularly our intuition. And sadly, when we lose touch with our intuition, we make our lives much more difficult. We actually make the other work harder because we no longer are in the flow of things we're fighting against. So it's my thought that actually we can think better when we have our intuition in place as well. We can write and create and innovate better when our intuition is in place and when we're centered in that way and operating from a place of connection as opposed to a place of, I don't know, like what would you call that? Being in your ivory tower and totally removed from everything.
Checked out, or the rat race, which is what we all do. A lot of thinking, a lot of knowing, and it's not big city stuff or the big bank or corporations. It's actually starts, well, here and just
Mhm.
loosening up a little.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Takes the crowbar of illness, a death in the family, half the time a car wreck or something horrendous that we don't want to like go through. But sometimes it's the only way we start paying attention again. You knew it as a kid, but adulting kicks in. I'm going to give you a couple random quotes. React to what you will about them. They're from all over, either angels, Native American chiefs, historical from Einstein. Here's one from Dull Knife in 2012. Trust more, worry less. There is no such thing as silence. There is only stillness. I'll give you one more so you can hedge here. What's the difference between thinking and awareness? An angel named Heather said, limiting versus limitless, time versus timeless, which is kind of what we were just talking about. Can you take it from there?
Those are wonderful quotes, all. I guess the sense I get from things is that consciousness is non-local, time is not what it seems, and we need to get our brains out of the little box that we've put them in. Um, and also know that our brains are not the origin of everything. This is a live debate in, philosophy and science, of course. The idea that consciousness is developed by the brain, it's a projection of the brain. And it's my professional and personal experience that the brain is a receiver, not the transmitter, right? So we actually are able to receive this, our higher consciousness and connect with higher consciousness. And that just makes the world much bigger. Everything expands very quickly when we recognize that we extend outside of our skin,
Mm.
right? So, so I would say to all of those quotes and to this conversation more generally, that anyone who's struggling with these concepts, which is normal because we don't have absolutes. We don't, and I don't want to give anyone absolutes. They have to discover for themselves. But when we gently hold the possibility of that expansion and think, maybe I'm actually much bigger than I thought. Maybe there's a part of me that's infinite, and maybe there is in you as well, and we're connected right now. If you just gently hold the possibility of that, it's quite extraordinary what can happen.
I love it. Okay, three quotes about healers. A
Mhm.
true healer kindles the power already within another. A healer is simply someone who helps a person confront opposing forces within him or herself to promote health. And then
Mhm.
finally, this one's a long one. A healer is someone who is able to raise their frequency, to connect to the source, light energy, whatever they call it, all there is, to connect to the, to connect to all there is while keeping themselves clear and fully connected. They use this elevated frequency to help others directly or indirectly. Can you apply that to what you're learning, your appreciation, your allowing has brought you to?
Mm. I love and agree with all of those philosophies. As a shamanic practitioner, I work with helping spirits. So I have a team of helping spirits that I work with daily who assist me in my work, who really I assist them actually. Um, and so I can't claim that what I'm able to help people with is my own doing. I need to be a hollow bone, as it's sometimes called in shamanism. So what I need to do, and this is now not an issue at all anymore, but the initial training is really about getting yourself out of the way, taking your ego out and your expectation out of the way, and to be the hollow bone so that you can be of assistance in that way. And that is how the work happens. If I'm not a hollow bone, the work does not work. I mean, I actually cannot do any of the things that I do in this healing room if it's me doing it. That's not where we get the wisdom, the insight, the healing, the moving of energies. That's just me moving around and having effort, right? It's not going to bring the healing. So the healing is something much larger than ourselves, but that we all have a birthright connection to. And as a shamanic practitioner, particularly you're a hollow bone, there might be other language we use in Reiki, but it is similar in that you are channeling an energy that's not your own, but that you have a birthright connection to. We all are part of, but it's not us. So I'm not going to just sit there and take my energy and hand it to someone else or channel it. Obviously, that's not sustainable. And they need this very high, beautiful vibration or this very powerful extraction work or whatever it is that we're doing. And I cannot do it on my own. I'm the hollow bone that can conduct this as a healer. So that's very much how I see it. I don't heal others. I'm a healer in the sense that this is where you come to get that healing ignited, where you can have that hollow bone delivering the things that you need. I can be that hollow bone for someone, but I cannot heal them. It's not my job as an individual to heal them. And I think your quotes sort of speak to those concepts because when we're able to help channel life force to someone to give them that extra boost, or to identify things that maybe only their higher self knows they need to let go of. We're really just looking for, guidance and that assistance. And we all need assistance in our life at some point. And in my healing journey, yes, I had shamanic work that was very powerful and profound and life-changing, and Reiki as well. It's the reason I trained for years in these modalities as a result. But yeah, none of those people could just go, "You're healed." That's not what, at least as our human selves are not able to do that. Maybe our higher selves in some other dimension can do it instantaneously, but here, Earth side, there's layers, and we need to work through our healing ourselves. And when we have helpers and guides and mentors along the way, or we can see healers who can create the environment, who can facilitate, that is a beautiful and powerful thing, and something I'm very honored to be part of.
Nice. Okay, I'm gonna light some sage and blow to you with the red-tailed hawk feather. You'll catch it hopefully in Canada. Now, just to let people know, we did it before the show. I do this on every show. It's the bare minimum. With your permission, we'll maybe put up some angel photos or Odin, I forgot to mention. And if you want to get a topic that you're like, oh yeah, because you're already there, you can talk to us about whatever topic you heard, or you can just share what you hear at any level, but we'll let you play it how you will. But I'm going to light some sage. Folks at home, if you haven't ever watched this show, this is like about no limits. So give yourself a break about what you think the constraints are of having two screens and being wherever you are in Europe. And maybe it's 2028 and you're watching this 4 years after the fact. It doesn't matter. You can catch the sage smell. Why not ask for flowers on top of it? Why settle for sage? Get some lavender, wisteria, hibiscus. And then if you really want to go crazy because you're already like wildly intuitive, then get some ocean smell. Pick your favorite ocean. Let the universe, angels, whoever, the helpers that are unconditional love, just here to assist, bring you something truly extraordinary. And to Ray in Vancouver Island, what are you getting in Canada?
Yeah, I'm getting a little bit of the sage. I also have my tree fern and tallow wood here, and they're intermingling. So I feel like I might be sort of sending and receiving simultaneously. Mm.
I love it.
This is, in fact, from Australia, this tree fern, tallow wood, tea tree, and wattle.
Ooh.
And see if that just sits as some top notes over your beautiful sage that you're sending. Mm.
And I snubbed it out just so I don't smoke out the office here. I'm going to set this down. I'll put a couple photos of angels in light energy form, but just unconditional love energies if people want to hear it that way. Here's Joy, and if you could get either a reminder on a topic that would be wonderful for us to hear about, or her saying something directly, either way.
I'm just getting messages about the importance of joy and how I haven't been prioritizing it enough. And
Aw.
perhaps a lot of people who are watching this are in a similar boat, getting caught up with the things we need to do. And the things I feel very motivated towards helping others, especially now that I feel so fortunate to not be in pain. But I do need to remember joy too for myself, because that is healing in its own right.
And I have a quote for you. This one I can remember. It's pretty rare I remember anything, but here we go. And Angels said this, and this is like a hand grenade into whatever version of reality you're living in, whether it's all the way up the happy scale or all the way down. You're like, this happened to me, this happened to me. My situation is, my drama is, my problem is, you don't understand. You can be happy now in this very moment for no reason whatsoever. Now, if you yell "but" right away at the screen and throw the laptop away or whatever you're watching us on, you're in a pickle, a bind, a pinch. My advice would just be, hey, the universe is really big. Once you get a different perspective and a different flow going, one day you'll look back and be like, wow, I understand now why that all happened. But when stuff's happening, it can be tough. You're stuck. Can you talk to us about that quote? I'll throw Claire up, an angel who's resilience, to maybe one more thing. It could be just vibrational. It could be words.
I love resilience. This image really speaks to me in that energy of Claire. What I like about the resilience as well is that isn't there a sense with that one that it's radiating outwards? You can see the circles, the circular nature. So we spoke before about cycles, and I'm really seeing that here in a kind of radiating sense with resilience, because through the cycles, our own resilience can radiate and grow. So I really like that. I find that very, very moving. I have um, I have a little deck here in front of me that I just decided to reach for and was immediately shown the shaman. And this is a wonderful deck called the Magical Drum, which is focused on Sami culture, which is from Northern Europe. So some of my ancestral background, I've got that Norwegian, Icelandic, Dutch, as well as some Anglo-Saxon, but also a little bit of that Sami background. And they are, truly one of the remaining shamanic cultures, I think, certainly maybe even the only remaining shamanic culture in Europe, in Northern Europe, along with in Siberia, of course, as well.
Mm.
So the Sami culture is very important and somewhat endangered. You think of those remaining cultures that have survived despite quite a bit of persecution. The Sami certainly come to mind. So I do love this deck and this reminder of that beautiful culture. And here's also reindeer in the fence. I really like this too, Michael, because this speaks to protection. If you think back to those cold winters, you're thinking Northern Europe, you're thinking of Sami culture, and you've got the cold winter coming, and you've got the fence for your reindeer to protect them, to keep them with you through the winter and to look after them. So I love that. So not all fences are for constraint. Sometimes they're for protection, and that's a kind of a nuanced thing. So I wanted to share those with you.
Let me put up another angel for you named Heather, and if you want, we can do Odin, and we can talk a little bit about Norse mythology. But I'll say it's just unconditional love guides who've been around forever that are present. And if you're willing to allow for some extra help, you'll get it. I'm getting ear ringing on that. I didn't do a good job. Okay. Here's Heather, who makes hearts in her photos. I have her in a lot of other different hearts. Can you just, she's compassion, 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 like an Amazonian goddess, if you don't mind, Latin America or Africa. People from Cape Town or wherever in South Africa get the soil from her. She's big.
Hmm. Feeling it in the heart.
And here's another heart of hers. There we go.
Mm.
And another heart.
Mm.
And I have many where I just either was a half second off or a half second too soon or whatever. And she's like making a heart, but it got smushed a little. What do you get from her for a topic that this is about the heart and living more and loving more and show love always? Good luck with that.
What I'm getting is that the hurts in our heart are all part of learning greater compassion for ourselves and for others.
Nice. Okay, back to Odin. I never get to do Odin. I never even get to mention him, and I'm so bad for that because he's amazing. He's a
You
healer.
can always mention Odin with me.
Yeah, he's a healer. He's a warrior. I'll put him in like Geronimo's very much in all directions, like action and with Odin, big lightning bolts. Here's Odin for you. If you could just get one more topic for us on this front about trusting more the currents of life, the universe.
Yeah, greater forces at work. Greater forces at work. And Odin is a figure who really represents in so many ways the seeking to discover more about those forces. I mean, he went to extraordinary lengths for the wisdom that he's so well known for. He did all kinds of things, good, bad, and otherwise, in fact, on his journey to be this wise one-eyed god. So he is our Gandalf and our wanderer, but also our warrior. He's formidable. He's the shaman. He literally is the, you know, the blueprint, if you will, for what we would often call the shamanic death rite. Are you okay there? Did you
Yeah,
just get
yeah, no, I felt that when you said it. So I got a little shake.
see that? Yeah, I can see that. Yeah, the shamanic death rite of Odin is what brought us the runes. He sacrificed himself to himself on the tree Yggdrasil for 9 days and 9 nights and took the runes up screaming. So he is an example of someone who, yes, has died and brought something back from the beyond to gift us with, as humankind, to gift us with language, language and words and these cosmic energies and these symbols. So yeah, a classic shamanic death rite, a really a seeker. He is the archetype of the seeker, going out to try to learn. And I work a lot with Freya, more so even with Freya. I work a lot with goddess energy, but Freya is the goddess of Satyr, which is the other aspect of my work. It's the Norse shamanic women's magic, if you will. And it was thought of as being quite gendered. I think that that's problematic and anyone can practice it. But there was this idea, certainly that's written about in the sagas, that practicing Satyr was ergi, which means unmanly. And so here you have Odin, this central god considered the wisest, and Freya taught him Satyr and he practiced it. So he was sort of gender bending, if you will. He was showing that we are more than these categories right away already. And he gave her the runes as well. So there's this wonderful way in which Odin was challenging stereotypes, even with the mythology around him, his story. Um, and of course, myth is a funny way to put it. His reality, his whatever, this spiritual tradition, he was already showing all of these different ways that we can, you know, seek knowledge and not let obstacles and barriers of like our everyday perceptions get in the way. So that is wonderful, Odin, and I have a very rather formidable image of him to share with you. With you know, Odin in his form there, really at the gates of Valhalla, welcoming the warriors in. And I just pulled this card for us, which I think is very appropriate as well, which is the High Priestess, very much in that Norse or Nordic tradition.
I love it. I'm going to put up one more photo, a historical photo of older Geronimo, sort of in the same vein, but you know, the Native American side of the picture. Anything you want to experience, feel, he'll bring it to you, but also maybe a quick reminder of a topic that you've got in your hat.
Mm.
And people at home, you can put your hand out and feel the vibe here on your hand, your fingers, both. If you try too hard, you'll feel some warmth on your toes or your back. Ask for a Native American smell, one of those 50 satyrs, sage, sweetgrass, juniper. You get the idea. What did you get?
I'm getting strength and compassion. I just getting a lot of sense of strength and compassion and the message around that, that they are not incompatible. They are in fact both very much needed at the front of all of our intentions and actions.
Oh, beautiful. And I'm going to hold up a book that I grabbed off the shelf while we pause the video. If anyone noticed, I don't ever rarely do edits, but I did this time. I wanted to get Dreamtime in Inner Space. This is a classic book from, it's Shambhala, the group that usually does like Chogyam Trungpa, Tibetan
Mm.
Buddhist
Beautiful.
publications. And this is 1987 or 88. And
Yeah.
there's the author. It's a beautiful book with stories all over the globe of indigenous shamanic, either the practitioner, how it came to be, or how they do their work, documented, a lot of research. Again, I can only tell one that I can remember, and it is Irkutsk, Russia somewhere, a seal hunter. Before the season starts, he goes to the cliff face. It's just a giant wall, giant rock. He grabs a little rock and he rubs for like 3 days till he goes transcendental. The cliff opens up. The seal spirits come out of a cave that you didn't know was there. They have a conversation. And from then on, he's essentially blessed or been given a good permission to hunt seals safely for all involved, minus a few seals. That It's a beautiful book. It's not something I get to do is ever recommend older books like this on the show, but I think it's very relevant to what you're.
Very relevant. It's very relevant. I think of modern writers. There's a lot of different writers I really appreciate, and again, coming from different traditions, whether it's from Northern Europe, whether it's from modern Americas or from South America, there's a wonderful shamanic resurgence happening as we reconnect with, all the beings on Earth. We're reconnecting with nature and we're reconnecting with our roots. This is really from the times, at least of the Upper Paleolithic. So we have in our DNA, if you will, we have this history, this knowledge of the shamanic, by whatever term we're going to call it. And speaking of terms, I want to mention that I call myself a shamanic practitioner, and you've been very good to follow that as well. And I specifically don't call myself a shaman because we're not living in a traditional shamanic culture. It's a choice that I make. It's a particular philosophy that some of us have. It's also the reason I don't, at least so far, call myself a vulva, because again, that would be someone who was in Norse society, not elected, but chosen by the community as the person. So the shaman would be the person in that community, and the vulva would be that person, and often would travel to do this assistance for people. So a Seid Kona would be the appropriate term for the Norse for me, and a shamanic practitioner as the modern term of what we use for the sort of work that I do. And I think it's really good to sort of acknowledge those roots and also acknowledge the shamans who are out there right now, who are living in societies that are often endangered and who have carried this role for a long time and are they are the shaman for that people. They need to be, honored and acknowledged. And in many cases, their cultures actually need to be protected because they are endangered by, mineral resources and sometimes companies coming through and wanting to obliterate their land. So it's a good thing just to kind of acknowledge it and see that we have this rich culture, this rich history that belongs to all of us with this form of healing, and look at it with that kind of respect and historical perspective.
Wonderful. I'm going to read a compassion quote from either a Native American chief, an angel, and then, with
Yeah.
your permission, I had one more set of photos. Jaguar spirit, 3 different photos of jaguar in repose, so your authentic inner self, moving through a river, walking, so fluidity, and then the majestic one, I think you'll really like, in a tree, but compassion. An angel named Dale, who lately just said a couple months ago, after 12 years of knowing Dale, said from Andromeda. That throws a whole nother bailiwick into the mix here. I don't even know what I just said, but it changes everything for angels. Oh well, love is love. He said, compassion is just being and trusting the outcome to be of the highest intent for all.
I think it's beautiful to set that intention. I always set that intention in sessions that it be for the highest good, because often we cannot know what that is. If we put our human agendas onto things, we can sometimes push them in a direction that isn't the highest good. So there's a lot of trust in that. There's a lot of trust in that process of setting the intention for the highest good and being open to it.
Well said. Okay, Jaguar spirit, and this is the one that's the inner authentic, whatever I'm trying to say, awareness within your inner authentic self. If people want to put a hand up and feel, and if you do put a hand out to the side like you own a really big dog, Jaguar will walk by, you'll feel a really wiry, coarse hair on your hands. The tiger from India that's on my wall off to the side, you can see on my room, it's soft. The tiger's soft. The Jaguar is like a wire brush. Sorry about that, folks. But everything is different. Contrast.
Jaguar is interacting with my power animal right now, so they're getting
In a good way, I trust.
very much. They're interacting well. They've just been checking each other out, and now they're cool. That's really nice. I like
And
that.
I'll put fluidity version of Jaguar. I think it's a she. I don't know. But going through the river, and that you will hopefully provide some context in here. Here's moving Jaguar fluidity.
Mm. I love that. I'm getting a message about, the fine line between being pulled along by the current and choosing your path. There's a real There's something very nuanced there. I don't have the answer to it, but there's something there to sit with. Beautiful.
Beautiful again. And then this one should steal the cake. Did I say it the right way? This takes the cake. And let me make sure I've got it on screen. There we go.
Wonderful.
Sort of everything at once and resting in your own power, standing in your own light, if you want to do it one way.
Also, the higher perspective. The higher perspective, you've got that jaguar up in the tree where they can see things more clearly in a moment of calm and repose. That's powerful.
Gorgeous. Okay, last little quote or anything, and then you're wrapping our show up with us to just share whatever you want to share. I'll do a quote that just as a reminder to get out of what you know and practice a little more openness, love, compassion, and just letting go of thinking, whatever you want to call it, pumping the brakes, societal brakes. Sometimes the person next to you or a stranger just needs validation via love and compassion. A smile changes any moment. So too does laughter or a few kind words. Be compassionate to all. Do it. Same angel named Dale said this at the end of my little Listening to Angels book, which I did not write. I saw balls of light as I was typing. But what's your reaction to that? And can you take us into our final chapter here?
What I am being shown is the way that in shamanic work we see things often as metaphor. So there's a lot of very rich, for me, visual. Not everyone gets visual, but it's a very common part of it. When I journey with my drum, when I work with clients, when I look at them with shamanic vision, there's a lot of metaphor. And one of the things that I see often with clients is like tiny arrows or shards of glass that have stuck into them from the environment where those compassionate ideals have not been so present. So there's a reminder here about the impacts of our thoughts and words and how they can stick. And we have the opportunity to create the equivalent of that in a good way rather than in these tiny little sticking shards that make life more difficult as we continue forward and don't clear them. You know, eventually there can be layers of those that people are carrying around that affects their ability to see who they are, remember themselves. So yeah, I think I'm being shown really the message around understanding, knowing, seeing, feeling, and sensing what we put into the world and also what we are carrying.
Fantastic. I'm going to wrap up with a reminder for folks, which will be in below the video in writing of how to look. It's Tara Moss, the author, international bestseller, 13 or 14 books, including a nonfiction memoir, The Fictional Woman, that was also a #1 nonfiction best-selling book. Tara Moss, TARA Moss.com. But and I have to still do another plug. Since 2007 in Australia, UNICEF Goodwill Ambassador for Child Survival. Very important work you do. You're a documentary maker, presenter, speaker, journalist in many different publications. You also had the health crisis that was, I think, covered quite a lot that was one of your gateways to a broader experience to be able to help others as a shamanic practitioner. But I'll also just say a person who helps others, again, confront those opposing forces within to open up to life itself and to maybe get back on their unique life path they're meant to be living. Your website is spiritofhealing.ca for Canada, spiritofhealing.ca.
Spirit, yeah. You got to remember the, which sometimes is
the spirit.
It's often easily forgotten, even for me. So the spiritofhealing.ca is where you can find me if you're interested in the healing work. But also you can just find me. I'm out there. I'm online and engaged, and always looking forward to meeting new people and discussing all of these things. And Michael, it's just been such a pleasure to speak with you today, to connect with you. So thank you for your openness and for sharing your magic with me and also with all of your listeners, your viewers, and for what you put into the world.
Thank you very much. All right, Rae, thank you for being on Angels, Positivity, and Love. It was a complete treat. I felt it, and I'm pretty sure the audience will for years to come.